Hey guys, welcome into episode 8 of Unsportsmanlike Hangouts. We have a special edition today, Father's Day special. My role model, my father, Mark Deal, football coach for 40 plus years, is joining us today. How you doing, Dad?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about, I obviously know the story, so for the community, this is kind of the story for them and just some of the stuff that you experienced through your coaching career. So start off with when you first started coaching football.
Well, first of all, let me correct you. You said 40. Right. I started coaching in 1980, and so don't make me older than I am. But I started at my alma mater in 1980 at the University of Dayton.
1980, hold on one second. 1980, 10, that's 40 years, isn't it?
Yeah, but you're saying 40 plus. We didn't start the 20 season yet.
There you go.
Okay,
Correct.
hopefully we'll have one here soon. Yeah, I got sick one spring semester in college, so I had to drop a couple classes. So I had to come back for a half a year after my regular 4 years, and I had to do my student teaching to get my teaching certificate in Ohio. So I wanted to get in coaching at that point, and so I actually was offered a high school job in the area right outside of Dayton, and I was going to student teach and coach at the high school. And then one of my buddies that graduated a year before me had done it, where he went to the coaching staff at the University of Dayton and asked them to coach as a student, because he was doing his student teaching. So I knew it was possible. So I went into, and I knew all the coaches, obviously. So I went into Coach Carter, who was the head coach at that time, and asked him, if I could do that. And of course, he kind of challenged me a little bit as far as, back then it was big on, do you really want to do this? Because it's very time consuming. And you're putting a lot of hours in, and there's no social life and all that kind of stuff. And so he, kind of tested me out a little bit in the beginning, and but I stayed with it, and in the spring and before I started, and then we got started over the summer. And to my benefit and to my luck, because a lot of times coaching has a lot to do with timing, and obviously sometimes who and who and networking. But back then, the timing was perfect for me, because that year was the year that we won the national championship. We went 14-0 and won the Division III national championship. So it was a great way to kick off my coaching career, so to speak. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot. And one of my buddies that was on the staff, who graduated a year or two ahead of me, is now the head coach there. He's been the head coach for the last 10 years there. But so we still stay in contact. But you create a network and relationships, and it was a good way to get started, obviously.
Was that was that Division I AA still back then, or
No, the Division I AA had just got started. We had dropped down during.
That was Division III at the time, right?
Yes, we had just dropped down. The University of Dayton had just dropped down to Division III and started participating in Division III, because when I first got there, we were Division I. But now, there was one AA back then, and it was just getting started. And now I think there's a lot more teams involved in one AA, and of course they call it the BCS and all that kind of stuff. So they changed the names around.
So after that, you got the privilege to also coach at a juvenile facility, Skillman, up in where in North Jersey. It was one of the 30 facilities in North Jersey for juveniles.
Actually, Central Jersey. It was. It's right outside.
Some people believe Central Jersey is a myth. Just to put that out there.
Well, it's right by north of Trenton, and real close to Princeton. Not too far from Princeton. But after Dayton, I actually went to Marietta College for a year, and then I went up to Cornell in the Ivy League, which was a great experience, obviously, for 2 years. And then I wanted to get back closer to home after living up in Ithaca, New York for 2 years. And I was investigating and interviewing for high school teaching jobs and coaching jobs down this way and anywhere I could, obviously. And I interviewed up in New York, upstate New York a little bit. And I had a job offered to me down in Virginia, and I had one up in North Jersey offered to me. And but I ended up coming back here, and I ended up taking the Skillman job and we actually started the program. Not too many people are familiar with that setup, but Skillman was a court-appointed youth. So they were appointed to the school from the state. So basically, they're locked up. We were trying to model after, if anybody's familiar with the school in Pennsylvania, Glen Mills. Although Glen Mills wasn't state run. But we were trying to model that, and we started a football program and athletic program, and we were playing a lot of smaller schools, Group 1 schools up in central Jersey. We ventured down to Pennsylvania a little bit, like we played the George School, which was a small private school, Lawrenceville Prep, and schools like that. And then further up, we played Manville, which is a Group 3, and New Providence up in North Jersey, South North Jersey kind of area. So we played a lot of those kind of schools, and it was obviously a challenge, with all the racial issues that are going on right now. I was basically the only white face in the locker room for the most part. Most of my players were black, and I had maybe 1 or 2 white players on the team, and the majority of the kids that we worked with were black and Hispanic type kids. And obviously they had issues with discipline and things like that. Because they broke the law to get there, but we had some pretty decent athletes. So but it was a challenge to work with them and get them to work as a team and try to play against somebody else in a football game.
Do you remember what the record ended up being that year?
Oh gosh, I can't remember. We didn't have a full schedule because we were just starting out, but I think we ended up. Our first year, I think we ended up winning 2 games and tying 1, which was a great accomplishment. We lost like 3 or 4 maybe, and we were trying to play anybody that would let play us. Obviously there was a lot of schools that didn't want to play us at that point because they want to play a school with kids that are locked up type of thing. But we also played Janesburg, which is the bigger prison up there, which older kids. But we played high school age kids, obviously. But it was quite an experience.
That transitions me to my next topic here. Was that the pre-triple option era there? Were you running the triple option with them, or?
Well, back then I wouldn't call it the triple option. We ran the wishbone, and of course, back in the I was always enamored by when I was growing up. Of course, it's a lot different today with all the games that are on TV these days and stuff. But back in the day, in the early '70s and late '60s and stuff, there was maybe 1 game on Saturday afternoon on TV, and it was usually the better schools in the country. Like your Oklahomas and your Nebraskas and your Texas and Notre Dames and Ohio States and Michigan, USC types. Penn State as well. But, back then, that's when Texas and Oklahoma and Nebraska and obviously Coach Bryant at Alabama brought the wishbone to them. Were playing using the wishbone. It was very popular amongst all the colleges. And so I used to study the wishbone and stuff. And then obviously also in college, we ran the eye. When Coach Carter got there my sophomore year, and we were optionized, so we were kind of like Nebraska's type of offense, but it wasn't a triple option. It was an option offense, but not a triple option. But we mixed in power football and sweeps and other things as well with it. But we ran option. I wouldn't call it triple option at that point. It kind of progressed as we went along throughout the years. When Navy and Air Force and Army started doing the flex bone type of stuff and breaking the bone and doing that. That's when we really got into full-blown triple option stuff because I saw the advantage there of using it.
So when was like the first time that you truly used the triple option? Like what team were you at that point?
I would say I was when I first got to Maple Shade, we started
and that was what exact year was that?
I started at Maple Shade in 1993.
I was born in 1997 for reference.
Yeah, you weren't there yet. You were later on. You were on the sidelines a little bit as a youngster, but you weren't quite there yet. And we weren't in the wishbone. We weren't in what you see us do now. We were in what Colorado used to do when Colorado was prominent in national champs. We were in the power eye option type stuff. And we started out with that because we ran eye, and we also had the third back in there to make it a power eye. And we ran option like Colorado was doing. And then because we had a tailback that was pretty good, and he was our best back, so we wanted to get him the ball as much as we could. And and then we kind of progressed as we went along. I would say a couple years later, that's actually when right about that time is when Navy started doing it. It was before Coach Johnson got the Navy, but the staff before him was running the flex bone or spread triple option type stuff, breaking the bone. And we started going down there for clinics and spring practice and research. And Georgia Southern was very popular. So I would watch Georgia Southern on TV because they were national champs, 4 or 5 years in a row almost during that time with Irk Russell, the old Georgia defensive coordinator. He brought that. And Paul Johnson was his offensive coordinator actually at the time when they started doing that. And they were very successful, and they were winning 1AA national championships. So the old ham bone type thing, that was their quarterback, Tracy Ham. He ended up playing in Canada. But we started studying in it and getting used to it because we knew the wishbone a little bit, but we didn't know, the whole philosophy and thought process of breaking the wishbone and doing it from the spread formations. And started learning that, and we started progressing towards that and using that more.
So what happened when you got to Audubon? So you were at Maple Shade and then you went to Audubon, correct? That was your transition?
Yes.
So what happened when you got to Audubon and there was a certain 15-year-old, extremely tall, lanky kid there that some people don't know by the name of Joe Flacco, 2013, 2012 season, 2013 year, Super Bowl MVP. What did you do when you had the triple option offense as your staple and your scheme, and you see this lanky 15-year-old, really tall kid throwing the ball 60 yards in the air?
Well, first of all, I got hired late for that job. So I got hired right before the summer, like right as the summer was starting. So school was just letting out. So, I didn't really know who Joe was as far as, how good a player he was and everything. And then, actually an interesting story was after meeting his father, we had crossed paths because his dad played at Penn when I was coaching at Cornell. We didn't know each other necessarily, but, we had a little common bond there with the Ivy League kind of thing. And so I got to know the family better and everything. But this was the story. We weren't doing triple. My thought process is we weren't going to go in with the triple option right away. We were going to run some option when we first got there, but we were more of a wing T type of, thing. We had a quarterback coming back who was a senior, had a real good arm, and wanted to throw the ball with play action type of stuff. But we weren't a real true triple option type of theme at that point. More wing T type stuff. And over the summer, we were doing our summer workouts one night, and Joe was throwing the ball, and it was early in the summer. One of our second day, and the freshmen were with us, and I had the quarterbacks down there. And so I was talking to one of my assistant coaches at the time, Coach Enders, and we were staying in a way where they were working on a deep out route, and Joe was the quarterback who threw a ball. We were kind of like in the middle of the out route, about 15, 20 yards away from him. And all of a sudden I hear this ball. I didn't see it. I heard it go whizzing by my head. A tight spiral, that sound that a tight spiral makes when it's got a lot of velocity to it. And I said, whew. And I turned around to see who threw it, and it was Joe. And at that point, Joe was, barely 6'4", and he was probably, soaking wet. He was about 170 pounds soaking wet, just this tall, thin thing. But he had an arm and a half. And that's when I first took notice of how strong his arm was. And I made the comment to Coach Enders at the time. And I said, boy, if we do things right with this kid, he's going to play on Sundays someday. He's definitely going to play on Saturdays at the next level, and he'll play on Sundays someday. Not knowing that he would have the career that he's had, but so we couldn't do that kind of stuff with Joe. Although we did a tiny bit, but not much. We had our backup quarter. We didn't have anybody like Joe in the program beside him, and we didn't have the receivers and the line to protect them and stuff. So we did a lot of short passing game and play action type of stuff. Because Joe, we couldn't do the spread stuff that people are doing now, or just starting to do back then, because, of course, and we were in the Colonial Conference at that point, and so we're playing Paulsboro and Woodbury and all these really good Group 1 and Group 2 of West Effort, and Collingswood and Sterling and all those.
I heard stories about Woodbury people telling me they used to send the all-out blitzes at Joe because they didn't really had too much around Joe. So sending out the all-out blitz was really the way to stop him.
Right. Well, because the line couldn't protect, I remember Joe's first action. Everybody makes light of me, the guys I used to work with at Gateway. used to make like Joe was a freshman but he wasn't playing varsity at that point. We had a freshman team and he was playing freshman football. But he did get in a couple varsity games as we progressed throughout the year. And I remember his first game that he got in was against West Stafford, against Coach Folsom, who had a real good team at the time. And I forget the kid's name that he had, but he had a big linebacker who went to Boston College, fullback linebacker, who was really good. He was probably 235, a real big kid, and obviously real good to play at Boston College. But as soon as Joe got in the game, I called a three-step drop pass, so he could use his arm, and we were down by a lot in the game. Obviously, at that point, it was in the fourth quarter, and just to get him used to throwing a little bit under live fire against somebody else. And Coach Folsom walks his linebacker up, his two linebackers up in A gap, and here they come. And I could hear Joe's a freshman, obviously, like I said, and he wasn't real big weight wise. And I could hear his knees knocking like he was getting nervous, seeing these guys walk up in A gap, and he knew we weren't going to be able to protect him. Well, he took his three-step drop. I don't even think he got 3 steps in. He probably had 2 in maybe, and he was trying to get the third foot down, and he threw the ball, and we're standing right on the line of scrimmage to the side, and he threw the ball over my head and into the first row of the stands because he wanted to get rid of that ball so fast, and he ended up getting hit pretty good. But Joe, don't mistake me, Joe was a real tough kid. I've seen him take some shots, and up to that point, up until his recent injuries in the pros, he was never hurt. He took some shots, some people, and
he had a record in the NFL going. He was like one of the top 5 most active quarterbacks during the Eli Manning and all those guys' era of playing consecutive games to start his career until he's also in that category. A lot of people forget with Carson Wentz, where he tore his ACL in a game and stayed in the game, and he ended up winning the game for the Ravens versus guys like Aaron Donald, who's considered the best player in the league, breathing down his throat with a guy that has a torn ACL.
Well, Joe's tough. I mean, you can't be an NFL quarterback without being tough to make it as far as he has, because
and your arch rival being the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, right. Because they got some monsters coming at you, and you're standing back there looking downfield trying to throw the ball, and you're getting hit from all different angles, everything. But Joe was a real tough guy, and he, like I said, he hadn't had any injuries until his ACL injury that kept him out of a game. Until a few years back, when he was with the Ravens with the ACL tear, and he stayed in the game. So that tells you how tough a guy he was. But he, we used to think he was made of rubber because some of the hits that he took in high school and even in college when he was at Delaware, and for the most part, and also in his career in the pros, he's a tough dude.
100%. One of my favorite stories, not to get ahead of the topics of schools that we're talking about that you coached at, but when you coached him his freshman to junior year, and then you got the head coaching job at Gateway during his senior year, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to leave, but I got riffed of school budget and everything, and so I was actually in line for a phys ed job at Audubon, and they kept telling me I was going to get it because I was already there. That was my third year, my tenure year, but the person that I was supposed to take over for never retired, and so they riffed the position that I was in, which was I was an in-school suspension teacher and part-time phys ed kind of person filling in. So they ripped that position, so I had to go looking for another job. I could have stayed on as coach, but I didn't have a full-time job. So as it played out, I interviewed a few schools, and they didn't want me to, teach at their school and then coach at the other school, obviously being a new guy. So it ended up that Gateway opened up late in the spring, and thanks to Fred Schwartz, who was my athletic director. That's a familiar name in South Jersey sports. But Fred's super guy, super athletic director, and helped me into that, and it happened real fast, and I ended up getting the Gateway job right away in the spring. So that following
who was one of the opponents on your schedule?
Obviously, we were in a Colonial Conference, so that following year, we're playing Audubon at home, and so. And
what's the story that you always told me? This is my favorite story about Joe. The story about him pregame on the 50-yard.
Well, Joe.
And he's also just a flyer out there. Everybody knows if you follow the Ravens or just how they are. They're more of a low-key team. They're more of a do the walking and less of the talking and actually succeed and win. That's just what they built their franchise off of, and that's kind of what he built his mantra off of too. So he's not really flashy or anything like that, but he knows how you are as well, and he wanted to kind of mess with you a little bit. So what happened?
Yeah, well, going back to Joe's thing, like all you get out of Joe is a fist pump, maybe, or a little thing. He's not the one to go crazy. But yeah, so before the game, we're talking and warming up and stuff, and so we're at the 50-yard line on our field, and I knew how strong Joe's arm was. Obviously coaching him for 3 years, and he goes, "Coach, watch this," and he took one step from the 50-yard line. And, you may say that over the course of time that this has gotten longer and longer, but I'll tell you what, if I had filmed it at the time, you'll be understanding that this is accurate. He took one step from the 50-yard line, and he says, "Coach, upper right goalpost." Okay. And so, how the little flags are at the top of the goalpost, for the wind. He took one step and hit the upper right goalpost one try after saying that. And I looked at it, I was like, holy cow. And there was not much wind. It wasn't that much of a windy day where, it would have put 10.
That was pregame, correct? Was there like a crowd there or anything?
That was pregame.
Was there a crowd there or anything? Or was that kind of like when
no, there wasn't.
The specialists were out there warming up and everything?
Yeah, no, everybody was doing their business and not really paying.
I mean, probably some people saw that and were like, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure a couple people might have seen it, but it wasn't like everybody was focused on it.
And I remember, you remember his out of college when they do the skills challenge and they do the arm power challenge, the arm throwing, arm strength challenge. And he threw it 74 yards off the bat, off the first crow hop, the first two steps, 74 yards off the bat. And no one even came close. Matt Ryan was 63 yards on his second attempt as he's throwing his arm out. And Joe's just casually just stepping forward and he throws it. I think he threw it even deeper. The first time I think was 71. The second time was 74. So.
What people might not realize that don't know Joe and his background so much was that he was a pitcher on the state championship baseball team at Audubon as well, and he was getting looks by several Major League Baseball teams, because he threw.
And he was also actually drafted, correct?
I believe
on like the minor league scale, obviously. Yeah, the MLB draft is so wide scale that there's like many levels. You get drafted and you may never even see the field for that team or even go to the organization.
Right. Well, I remember, when he was getting recruited, his junior year, and we had everybody in the country coming in to recruit him. And if they weren't coming, they were calling and whatever. Of course, that was all before the way the recruiting process is now, about 20 years ago. But, one of the questions that he had asked was, can he play baseball as well in college? And obviously, a lot of schools don't want their quarterback missing spring practice to play baseball. There was only one or two schools that said that they would let him do it, and if I remember correctly, and I think they said after his freshman year they wanted him to go through one full spring practice with him or whatever, so to speak. So, but Joe was a very accomplished baseball player as well, pitcher, and he could hit too.
So what will expand more on the recruiting process with him? You always told me one of the teams I was very interested that never obviously panned out with him, but Virginia Tech was one of the teams, and he was supposed to actually replace a very special quarterback that a lot of people know from Virginia Tech. Yeah,
Michael Vick. But to get it started, like I said, the recruiting process was so different back then because we didn't have the internet like it is now, and all these.
It's more of the face-to-face interactions. Network, you get a phone call, and then you expect the word of mouth from man to man that this man will show up from this program to the school and talk to you in person, and that's really the only way to go about it, unless you have an extensive phone call.
Well, you had to mail stuff out. I had to make copies because everything back then was on VHS tapes. So what I used to do for my seniors, that were getting recruited, my juniors, whatever, I had two, and you saw my setup when you were younger. In my room, I had two VCRs set up. So I would play the game tape on one, and then I have a blank tape on the other, and I would stop it when I saw a play that I needed to put on their highlight reel and tape it. And it would take forever. But I would spend most of my Christmas vacation when we had a week and a half.
That's interesting because I ended up going to school at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, and we have all the electronics on the computers, Adobe Premiere and all that stuff. Right. And I grew up watching him do the original wind backs, and then you would literally rewind it 6 times Then you'd have to find what you were going to record and then rewind it another 6 times, and then it's a whole process from there. So
and hope you got it right, so you didn't cut out part of it or get something else. But it was a lot of trial and error and everything like that. But then you had to make copies off of that, and then you had to, get the envelope, the padded envelope, and put a card in there to address the coach in the school that you wanted to get the tape, and get all these envelopes and mail, and obviously the school would mail a lot, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and you're doing it for not just one player, you're doing it for some other ones. Obviously Joe was the most popular one, and he's getting a lot of attention at that point, but not as much as he probably should have, coming from a small school in South Jersey like Audubon. So I caught wind of this guy who was a big recruiting network. So I made a copy and sent it to him. And then he got back to me right away. He says, can you filter it down? Because I had all of Joe's sophomore and junior highlights, offense and defense and everything. So it was pretty long. He had a lot of good throws and plays and stuff like that. And he was not only a good offensive player, but he played safety for us and did a nice job at safety. He was pretty good. And so I had to cut it down. He only wanted like 30 plays on the video, because I had probably over 100. So I went back and cut it down and sent it to him. And then as soon as I got it to him, he was going to broadcast it out to all the colleges, because he had that network back then. And as soon as that went out, then everybody started coming, looking at Joe. You name it, they came. Except
what do you think more so was? Obviously, they saw the first thing they started with. They saw the frame of a guy that was 6'6". Obviously was going to grow into his frame. He was what was the highest? Do you remember the highest weight he was in high school? Like, was he 210 pounds maybe?
I don't know if he got that high when he got to his senior year.
He made it up to his playing weight for the NFL was 250. So
well, he got thicker and everything, obviously, with the modern training techniques.
So more like 235, I should say, not 250. 235.
No, he's right about 245, 250 right now, and he played for the last few years like that. But he was, he had obviously room to fill out because he was tall, and obviously the first thing that caught their eye was his poise and his arm strength and his accuracy, and that was something that really stuck out on all the videos that I put out, and so that attracted lots of people. Like I said, we had everybody, from the East Coast coming in: Michigan, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Boston College. I mean, you name it, they were coming. Pitt, obviously, was Rutgers and Temple were the first ones to offer them, because they're the schools that are nearby. And they were telling me, and that was when Coach Schiano was first at Rutgers.
Greg Schiano,
now, but
old Tampa Bay head coach. In the 2000s.
Them in Temple were very fun, and they said, this is a no-brainer. They offered them right away. But at that time, Rutgers was struggling, and who knows, Coach Schiano got them going in a few years, but Rutgers was struggling. So, he decided that he wanted to go somewhere else, and he ended up going to Pitt for his first year or two. And actually, the story about Pitt was the coach was supposed to come in and offer him. I was getting offers over the phone in my classroom. Coaches from all over Central Florida, they were calling and offering them over the phone without even coming in and seeing them as soon as they saw the video. And actually, Pitt, the coach, never came to school, but offered him over the phone to me. He said he was in the area, and then he had to go home for a family emergency, and he called me in my class and said, but we want to offer Joe. And so he got offered by Pitt actually over the phone. That's where he ended up going. But the coach from Virginia Tech, you brought it up with Michael Vick was graduating, and Virginia Tech was on top of the world back then. With Michael Vick, they were doing really well and in the top 10, and had a great defense and all that kind of stuff. But the offensive coordinator at the time came in the Audubon, and I was sitting in the office with Fred Schwartz, the athletic director's office, and we knew he was coming. And of course, you're not allowed to have contact with the kids back then. It was in the spring, so he was asking me, "Is he really 6'4", 6'5"? And is he really that tall in his hand?" Because how in our profession, high school coaches, to get kids looks, sometimes they exaggerate a little bit, I'd say, on their kids' heights and weights and 40 times and stuff like that. And I try not to do that. I don't want to get caught up in that mess, because I know they'll never come back and recruit another kid that I have again if I don't give them accurate information. So we did all our stuff, and I put the right height down and everything. He goes, I said, "Coach, if you don't, if you're questioning that," I said, "the bell's going to ring in a couple minutes here, and Joe's in class right down the hallway. He'll come walking by." So the bell rang, 2 minutes later, and Joe comes walking by, And the coach from Virginia Tech, he was a good sized guy. He was probably about 6'2", 6'3". Joe came down. He looked up at Joe and introduced himself real quick and shook his hand. And when he bent his neck to look up at Joe, because Joe was a couple inches taller than him, and all he did was shake his hand and say hello, and that was it. And Joe was off to his next class. Came back in and says, "We're going to offer him." He came back in and told me and Mr. Schwartz that he was going to offer him a scholarship. So, but Joe ended up going to Pitt. But there was a lot of schools too, a lot of smaller schools where Joe ended up transferring to Delaware later on. A lot of those schools, and I knew Casey Keeler, the head coach at Delaware at the time, very well, because we used to work together before we were both in the coaching almost. But he schools like that would come in and say, "Well, if it doesn't work out, we're
the fallback
option. If it doesn't work out, don't forget about us. No, we're here for you. If it doesn't work out at one of the bigger schools, that kind of thing." And I think that was a common practice with a lot.
And the reason it didn't work out was because apparently Tyler Palko was going to be a better quarterback in the long run than Joe. And Tyler Palko played 3 preseason NFL games and then never played in an NFL actual regular season game.
Well, Tyler Palko, not to say anything bad about Tyler Palko, but University of Pittsburgh at the time, his dad was a big high school coach out in Western Pennsylvania, one of the big high schools, and he had played for his dad, I guess. And there was a recruiting line to Pitt. They had sent several players over the years to Pitt, and some good ones. And so it was tough to do that. But Tyler Palko's claim to fame, and it hurts me to say this because I'm a Notre Dame fan, but he threw 5 touchdowns against Notre Dame the one year, and that's where he got his name from at that. But he was a pretty good quarterback. But Joe never got the chance. And bottom line, quick, in a nutshell, Joe never got the opportunity to necessarily get to play with the ones at Pitt. So and then they got a coaching change, and then he was promised an opportunity again. He actually outplayed the quarterbacks in the spring game. And didn't get an opportunity. And a couple of the other quarterbacks below him transferred out because they knew Joe beat him out, and then Joe ended up transferring out.
So talk about next thing we want to talk about. We talked about Gateway and obviously Audubon, the connection to Joe, and then you went to Gateway and you played against Joe, and you were at Gateway for 8 years, and then after Gateway, you still coach there now. Now you're retiring, finally retiring. Congratulations to that. It's been a long time coming for teaching.
Tuesday was my last day of teaching.
Yeah, it's been a long teaching, I guess. Coming up, so it's a big special week for you. And then you found yourself looking for a job after Gateway, and it was kind of a transition period. You didn't really know what the next venture would be. You always had an offensive mind, so it was probably going to be an offensive job. You knew defense. You coached linebackers, which are the quarterback of the defense, so you could easily have coached the defense as well if you wanted to, but you more so studied the offense and wanted to really specialize in that. So you had that in mind. What really ended you up at Delsea for the first time? For the first time, I should clarify, for the 1 year period, and you guys won the national championship with guys like
not the national, we won the group 2.
Well, yeah, you won the
actually we're group 2.
Guys like Austin Medley from Villanova and Sean McPherson, right?
Yeah, he went out to Kansas.
Division II quarterback, running back.
And Jackson was our quarterback. It's too many. I don't want to name everybody because I'll leave somebody out. But I landed in a real good situation that year because Delsea had a really good team.
What was that situation like? Did you have a relationship with Sal going into that, the head coach there, or?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because we had a relationship on several fronts. First. We had a relationship at the gym. We work out at the same gym in Glassboro. So, we used to bump into each other at the gym all the time and talk and share ideas. Obviously, we have a wing T element to our offense at that point, before I got to Delsea as far as a Gateway. So we had, I would pick his brain about the wing T, and then he was picking my brain about the option. And I used to run a coaching clinic in the spring for the flexbone offense. I did that several years, and would bring in high school coaches from up and down the East Coast that were, interested in the flexbone offense. And then I'd bring in a couple college coaches that coached the offense. Like we had the Navy coach, Walford coach, come down and flew them up from South Carolina. But we had guys coming from as far as Maine and as far south as, South Carolina and we get a nice mixture of coaches from all over the high school, all over the East Coast and Midwest a little bit, and share ideas and have different speakers and do that. And Sal on his staff, Ron Flame and Rob Riles, and those guys that were more in tune with the offense down there would come to the clinics and take notes and get some ideas. And he wanted to expand the offense. So when the opportunity came up, when I left Gateway as a coach, I was looking into, other, because I wanted to stay in the coaching, and was looking into other ventures. We talked, and Sal offered me a position and wanted to do some options. So we started doing some options. And, we were still pretty hardcore wing T stuff back then, buck sweep and all the belly and all that kind of stuff that the wing T teams do. Traditional wing teams do, but we mixed in the midline option and the triple option a little bit, and then just kind of progressed from there. So, but we were very fortunate because that year, we went on to win the, at that point it was the South Jersey Group 2 state championship.
Ended up losing on Thanksgiving, though. I remember how upset the community was when they lost to Williamstown on Thanksgiving, which is actually a lost cause nowadays because they're kind of getting rid of the Thanksgiving games, which I think is completely bogus, because that's like saying you're not going to play two rivalry division games in the NFL anymore between teams like the Ravens and Steelers, or the Eagles and Cowboys, or the Giants and Eagles, or something like that.
Well, no offense to Williamstown. They have a great program. Coach has done a great job there. And, that was the last year, I think, that Delsea played Williamstown on Thanksgiving, because, Williamstown was a bigger school. And actually, we didn't play on Thanksgiving. We played the Friday after Thanksgiving that year, because we were in the championship game the following week against Haddonfield. And so we had a bigger fish to fry the following week, obviously, with a championship on the line. And Williamstown was done their season. I think they had lost in the playoffs that year, right the week before. But it was kind of for the Old Tri-County Conference Championship game kind of thing, because we were undefeated and they had one loss or maybe two at the time. So it was a tough game. Actually, Austin Medley was kind of banged up that game. He twisted his ankle in phys ed class on a volleyball standard, I guess. And but it was a tough game, and they pulled it out at the end and beat us fair and square. And so we were on to the next week, focused with Haddonfield, which we were able to, win and pull that one out. The interesting thing about that year was Delsea's offense before I got there with all the wing T stuff was really good, really strong, and very tough to stop. And just mixing in a little bit of the triple option was, just the right ingredient to really put us over the top. I mean, we were scoring a bunch of points. We actually broke at that point, we broke the South Jersey scoring record for a season as a team.
Correct.
I think we had 500.
You and Sal are actually the only two coaches ever as a duo in South Jersey history to have two 500-plus point seasons twice.
I don't know about that. You sure about that? I don't know, because I know
Right. I did the statistics. I'm trying to find the tweet now. I did the statistics before. I'm trying to find it now. But you were there for 1 year, as I'm looking up this tweet and trying to find it. You were there for 1 year, and then you moved on to Clearview. And then you also got a shot at Delsea for the first time when I was, a senior? I was a senior at the time. As you can see now, I'm probably ranging. Me and him actually argue. That's funny. It's something, side topic here. Me and him argue, and we both weigh ourselves on the same scale, and we both argue about our weight all the time. I do have to admit, for a guy his age, he really does outwork me really extremely hard. But, I mean, I have excuses. He's had some surgeries, but I had a big time knee injury when he was the coach he was my head football coach in high school. And I ended up coming back. My first game was versus Delsea my senior year, and we ended up beating Delsea. And it was a really close game. We scored 14 points and got out to a big lead. My best friend, Nair, scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, got out to a huge lead. There were 2 really long touchdowns. And then we got stagnant. They tied the game up, and then it came down to a late conversion. I think there was a safety that we ended up converting. And
we blocked the punt.
Blocked a punt. Yes, we
Yeah,
blocked a
and
punt. I
we
don't know how I don't remember that. We blocked a punt. Joey Cole's always coming up clutch. Joey Cole's the best player on our team, always coming up clutch, coming out of nowhere. So
I don't know why you're bringing this up, because all the Delsea guys are probably listening to this, and Coach Bryler.
That gets to my question. What was the game plan going into playing Delsea? Like, what did you know about that? Why were you able to get out to such a quick lead? I was on the team. I more so was reserved for the defensive end. My offensive end, I tore my ACL in the game that I started both ways my junior year. So I kind of retired from offense at that point. So I was on a snap count as well. I played 15 snaps in this game. So I kind of had an outside perspective and looking on the offense and everything going on. So what did you know? What were something that you studied that you maybe knew? Obviously, you don't want to give out anything about Sal now being his coworker, but what was something that you knew that Sal was a tendency for Sal going into that game?
Well, it wasn't necessarily Sal. It was just having been there, I kind of knew their philosophy and thinking as far as
more so how they would operate to begin the game.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily how they begin the game, but how they their thought process a little bit about how defending certain offenses and things like that. And we had scrimmaged them when I was at Gateway prior to that back in the day, and which was a little different. Obviously, our offense was a little bit different at that point. But I kind of took some mental notes and everything. Not to say that I knew anything more than they knew, but we were just fortunate that we jumped out. I mean, it was a matter of a hair. When Nair caught that pass, it was a matter of a hair. The safety.
Well, that's why I bring that up, because that was a pass that you would whip out. Usually when you knew something about a certain team in a certain way they would play, and so their safeties biting on certain things and coming up and trying to run with motions and going this way and the other way. And then
you kind of, after the first series or so, you kind of have an idea of what they're doing. But Coach Maxwell, who's the defensive coordinator at Delsea, who I work with, obviously I don't want to get him mad at me, but he tried to fool us that game with changing from fronts a little bit, and he was rotating his secondary. And I noticed that was the one thing I saw, they were rotating their secondary when we sent our guy in motion, and so we tried to take advantage of that, hoping that the backside safety wouldn't get over in time, because the front side safety was coming down to take the pitch back. And we were fortunate enough to get that one long pass to Nair and get the early lead. And then, but things changed as that game, though. That was only the first quarter. Second quarter, Delsea dominated us. And then the third quarter was kind of
dominated the game for practically the second. 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter until we were stagnant. It was 14-0, and then we couldn't do anything.
For sure, and we ran out of gas, and they
had some studs as well. They had the freshman that ran me over. I actually one of the 15 plays I played, I got put in on the last drive on a third down play, and I ended up tackling the kid, but I didn't even tackle him. I got ran over, and I thought I actually had a concussion because the kid. What was that kid's name? He was the 5'9", like 220-pound sophomore or freshman or sophomore fullback, and he was an absolute bulldozer.
Yes, he was good, and that was worrying me because I knew that we would have a tough time stopping him the rest of the game.
And they ran that on third down, and I ended up, like I said, making the play, but I kind of more so just threw my body in front of a freight train and got ran over, and I was, at the time, the strongest I ever was, in 235 pounds, and this kid was 220, but actually fit and muscular, and that team just all around. They had the defensive end at the time as well. I forget his name. But Delsea has just always pumped out lots of just guys just from all over, and it's not just like certain positions either. It's from all different types of positions, whether it's edge rushers and guys like that. So that hits more so on the second time you were around there. That was the first time you were there, only for the first year. Went to Clearview, like you said, like we talked about. You were at Clearview. You played against Delsea, and then once you moved on from Clearview, you were looking for a job again, and you had some familiarity, and you talked to Sal and ended up getting a job and joining the staff again. What was the second time around like?
Well, the second time.
This is actually the current events as well, because this is currently happening. This is going on to be what, your fourth year there or your third year there?
Well, this will be my fourth year in a row and my fifth year overall, counting that 1 year back in the day.
2009.
Right. And we timed it just right again, obviously, because we had a real good team when I first came back. And even though we struggled early on, and one of the things I was going to mention earlier when you were talking about when we played Delsea when we were at Clearview, was it was probably better to play them early in the season, because once they
I was just about to hit on that. They would start 0-3 every year, and then you look in the paper, you forget about them because they're not in your
not
group.
Every year, but
paying attention. And then they're winning the conference after they're going 0-2 or 0-3.
They don't hit all cylinders until mid season and later on. It's the tradition. That's what you hear down there from people. But we had a real tough schedule. Obviously, they're playing some really good teams, and we struggled a little bit. And we actually our quarterback got hurt, and so we were playing with a backup quarterback to start the season, and we go right into Timber Creek that game, and a game went down to the wire, and we thought we got a pass at the end of the game there in the end zone, but they didn't give it to us for a touchdown. So we ended up losing that game in a close one, and then we played Holy Spirit, who had a real good team. I don't know if we played Holy Spirit next, but we played them within the next game or two, and we lost a close one down there. So we played some really good teams, and we started off kind of slow.
And Holy Spirit was also a team to mention. Was a team that runs the offense, so it's tough to play against a team that's that good and runs a similar offense.
At that point they weren't. You're thinking of when
they weren't running the offense at that point. Well, when we scrimmaged them, they had a couple defensive or D1 kids. When we scrimmaged them at Clearview, they were running the triple option at that point, and they were us, but with guys that were fully grown men. So it was a tough scrimmage. We ended up tying that scrimmage. So.
That was prior to that. That was when John and I knew.
But to get back onto Delsea, when you played Holy Spirit, so they weren't running that at what offense?
They were. My buddy actually, John Iannucci, was the head coach at Holy Spirit when they were running the offense. I had coached with him at Cornell back in the day, and he was a big wing T guy, and then he got into the flex bone like I did, and he's known for that at that point. But we played him, and he wasn't the coach at that point when we were at Delsea. But Holy Spirit had a great team, and we came down the wire, and we ended up losing that game. And so we were struggling in the beginning, but we played real good teams. So then we started hitting our stride, and we started getting things going, and we ended up going through the playoffs, and we had to go back up to Timber Creek to play them again in the semifinal game, which, Leary was their quarterback, who's down at North Carolina State, who was probably the best quarterback in the state at that point. And, we fell behind at halftime, and it wasn't looking real good. And then all of a sudden, in the second half, things just started opening up, and we started making plays. And Aiden Bernadette, who's now at Harvard, our fullback, he was only a junior at the time. He did real well. And Maxwell, our quarterback, he ended up picking off 2 interceptions, and he played real well on quarterback. And our line did real well. We actually were beat up on the line. Throw a shout out to Coach.
That's what Delsey's always been built in the trenches because of just the style of offense.
It's not just that, but the coaching. Coach Ron Flame, shout out to him. He does a great job with the offensive line. And usually, it seems like since I've been at Delsea, we always have offensive line injuries, and we lose a couple starters, and he finds a way to get guys in there. And Tim Briles, who also works with the offensive line with him, and Rob Briles and those guys, they do a great job with the offensive line and getting those guys ready. But and that's where it's all made up front. But we ended up hitting our stride and getting a big win at Timber Creek, and then we went and played Woodrow Wilson in the finals at Rowan, and jumped out to an early lead. And then, of course, we lose our starting center, who was that
was a great game, by the way. The game was amazing.
And we were already playing with 2 younger guys on the line because of the injuries from before. And so the game got a little closer because
it ended up being 29-28, right? At the end of the game,
we ended up hitting a big pass down in our own end late in the game. We were back inside our own 5, and which I kind of find funny because everybody gives Coach Sal a hard time about not wanting to throw the ball. We don't spend a whole lot of time on throwing, and if we're lucky, we throw it once or twice a game. Take advantage.
So no one's really expecting it.
And he ended up throwing the ball from inside our own 5.
That's how you do it. That's how you. You got to keep the aces up the sleeve. You know that. So.
Right. Yeah, when they least expect it, right? That's very true about that.
Expect the unexpected.
So we hit the big play, and we get the first down. But the problem was we gained about 30-some yards on the play, but we fumbled at the end. And so we gave it right back to them, and now they got a chance to win. the game, and luckily, like I said, Coach Maxwell does a great job with the defense, and we kept them out of the end zone. We ended up winning the game.
And that was two just really good overall teams together, two camaraderie teams, like how Woodrow Wilson was down early and they came all the way back. And if I'm correct, they had that stud tight end at the time, the Division I tight end.
We had a couple of kids that were really good that went on and played Division I. Of course, their quarterback is up at Western Michigan now at the time. We had played them earlier in the year too, about mid-season, and beat them pretty good at our place. But obviously, this game, the second time around, was a little different. But we were able to hold on and win a championship, and that was very rewarding. So I was my first 2 years at Delsea, even though we were spread apart by a few years.